and we are going to be talking about some forbidden processes that I use for processing out frustration, grief, really any situation that brings up a sense of doubt or uncertainty or where you don't know what to do. This is a process that you can use, but this is a forbidden process. This is a process that is a derivative of something that Scientology took and then spun into the crazy cult-like things that they were doing. But I wanted to kind of go into the history of this process because I think that it's interesting, and I think that there are a lot of people I know from personal experience that use processes like this, but because they have a loose affiliation with Scientology, they don't ever like to talk about these things out loud. And because I'm experimenting with just being who I am and being authentic, you get to hear me talk about all the weird stuff that I'm into. But yeah, there's been an unfortunate demonization of some of these processes. You know, I've been to many workshops and many sales courses and many entrepreneurial masterminds where I talk to people about what are the most effective things that you're doing to be able to process your frustration, to be able to optimize towards the outcomes that you're looking for. And many people are using a variation of power processing, which I'll be going through today, in order to get into the underlying emotional kind of gunk that prevents them from finding solutions. And some of the top sales teams in the world, these are sales teams that you would have heard of, name brands that you know would be very familiar to you. Their sales teams, and these are sales teams that do millions of dollars in sales, are using these processes in order to make their salespeople more aware of what's happening in a sales conversation, allowing them to be more present with the people that they're with, and allowing them to read the people that they're interacting with so that they can not only close the sale, but deliver as much value as possible. So today I'll be going into this process. I actually have a frustrating thing that just popped up in one of the projects that I'm working on. And so I'll show you how I use this in real time to process that frustration and to get to solutions. But this, you know, is one of those processes that is highly effective, and many people claim to be their secret sauce. But due to the controversy surrounding it, the links to Scientology and to some of the other players there, it often gets poo-pooed, and I think that that's a real shame. So welcome to everybody that's tuned in on the Twitter live space, and for all of you that I see on the YouTube live stream. I will do my best to pop the live stream up onto the Jumbotron, so if anybody wants to see the full feed, you'll be able to do that here in a second. But this is a process that's called power processing, and power processing is essentially something that was created by a guy named John McMaster back in the day. And really, it's a derivative or it's a makeup of three different types of kind of therapeutic processes that you may have heard of. So one is cognitive behavioral therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy is a process that focuses on identifying self-talk, beliefs, and cognitive distortions related to a condition. And cognitive behavioral therapy helps explore the impact or the thoughts on emotions and behaviors and the questions that are related to things like consequences, mastery, and responsibility. And so this is really just a mechanism for you to be able to explore your own thoughts, to work out some of your ideas, and ultimately what you're doing is you're releasing some of the emotional trauma in your system that's preventing you from accessing or sending a clear signal into the field, into the ether, into the quantum machine, and getting back the solutions that are ready for you. It also incorporates aspects of Gestalt therapy, which is a therapy where it's really about getting very aware of what's happening in the present moment. Oftentimes in Gestalt therapy, you're like touching something, you're touching your desk, you're touching your chest, and you're using practices like this, you know, maybe looking at each of the corners of a room. You're using this to become very present with what's happening. And in that present moment, you're encouraged to then feel the sensations that are happening in your body. And as you tune into those sensations transmute themselves into a type of creative potential that your brain can then interpret as understanding or as solution. And then finally, this taps into aspects of existential therapy. So this is you kind of using repetitive processes to get into the themes of meaning, responsibility, and consequences of personal choices that exist in your life. Oftentimes, we are unaware of what our role is. You know, my girlfriend and many people in AA call this cleaning up your side of the street. You need to know what your role in things is, because if something is going wrong in your life, if something is frustrating, you're contributing your energy, your emotional energy, your attention to that in some way. I believe that we live in something that is akin to a consciousness simulation vehicle or mechanism, and that reality renders itself based on the state of our emotional soul condition. And so if we have error and error just happens when we are not wholly aligned with truth and not wholly aligned with love, if we're living from a place of emotional error, which often shows up as discomfort in the body, it's a physical sensation or an emotional sensation of discomfort, that usually means that there's some kind of error in our thinking. And if we can sit with that uncomfortable energy for long enough and work through that, use processes like this to get what's underneath that energy, we can oftentimes get to a place where we have a new understanding of the events in our lives. And that's when we can connect the dots and find solutions and ways to move forward. So this process that's called power processing, I'm going to go into some of the backstory, because I think it's important from a framework of transparency just to know where some of this stuff comes from. Again, you can find variations of this in more quote unquote legitimate therapeutic practices, but I learned it from, diving deep into the dark arts of Scientology and all of the hundreds of derivative Scientology systems that are out there. Many sales teams have picked up these systems because they are very effective at helping people identify insecurities, and insecurities oftentimes result in a nervousness that means that a salesperson isn't able to close the deal. It also just opens up a more fluid consciousness, and in that fluid consciousness, you're able to land on ideas and access ideas that serve the situation and serve the whole of the people, entities, and energies in the situation at a bigger level. So that's one of the things that drew me to these processes. I also just like to explore all the weird stuff that's out there and kind of mine these things for gold, because there are nuggets of truth in everything. And I feel like, as a very curious seeker, my job or the thing that's most interesting to me is to kind of dive down into these rabbit holes and see if I can get out. So rather than spelunking in a cave that might collapse on you, I go spelunking into a lot of the more fringe philosophies that are out there in the world. But I want to give a little bit of background on power processing and John McMaster, where it came from, because it's a pretty sad story, but it ultimately resulted in a process that I think has been wildly beneficial to a lot of people. So if you know anything about Scientology, you probably know the name L. Ron Hubbard. And L. Ron Hubbard was a narcissist who co-opted many people's work, and that's basically what happened with John McMaster, which in the 50s and 60s was one of the first quote-unquote clear Scientologists. And McMaster had some groundbreaking processes that he had brought, at the time in the 50s and 60s. If you study the history of Scientology, it was really, self-help wasn't as big an industry as it is now. And Scientology was kind of this entry point for a lot of people to have discussions about self-help. Like therapy wasn't really that big of a thing back then. We were still electroshocking people. There wasn't as fine-tuned an understanding of mental health back then. And so Scientology back then really was this kind of bastion of exploration and discovery, and it attracted a lot of really interesting people that were thinking about psychology before psychology was really something that had broken into the mainstream in the West. And so McMaster was one of those. He brought some of his processes that he had developed to Scientology, and unfortunately, those processes were stolen, twisted to the narcissistic needs of Scientology and to L. Ron Hubbard, and John McMaster's contributions were completely erased because this is what L. Ron Hubbard used to do with all of his processes. You know, if you go and read any of the Scientology books, he puts his name as the author of every single process, but almost always he was stealing one of these processes from one of his adepts or students within Scientology who had actually come up with the process in session, or he was taking old ancient wisdom and just repackaging it for a Western audience through the lens of Scientology. And then, of course, creating levels and tiers and making you pay a ridiculous amount of money to get access to all of that. So McMaster's power processing involved asking questions like, tell me an existing condition. And so what it was doing is it was getting you in the present moment. So I'll show you what it looks like, but you know, one of the things that it does is it gave you a safe container to be able to vent whatever was happening in your life at the time. So right now I'm having an issue in one of the projects that I work in where our code that syncs via third-party API isn't working, and it's on the third-party API's system. There's nothing that we can really do about it other than open a ticket. And because it's not working for literally everybody in crypto right now, the tickets have a wait time of like a day before somebody will respond in the chat. So that's incredibly frustrating because it's kind of paralyzed our project for a temporary time until that gets fixed. And so what I would normally do is go through this process in my own journal and work out some of that frustration. But the existing condition would be, I feel really frustrating about this thing that I don't have any access to. And then the question that you would ask after that, once you've identified what the current condition is what solutions have you had, or how could you handle that? So I'm not going to go through the whole process right now. We'll get to that in a second, but I'll show you in real time how I process out this frustration, and we'll see what kind of solutions come from that. You know, really this process is aimed at helping people build spiritual access to their own nervous system and to their own intuition, not just a surface level awareness. And there's a repetition to this process. It's just 2 questions, but in the repetition, you're going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, and you're uncovering all of the things that may have been unconscious or subconscious to you, so that you can clearly see all of the dots. And once you have that 100,000 foot view of all of those dots, you can connect those dots in interesting ways that ultimately allow you to move forward. Now, as I mentioned, unfortunately, Hubbard took some of these processes and twisted those for narcissistic control, basically limiting sessions and how you used it, and hiding some of the deeper truths of these processes behind these ridiculous paywalls. And these limitations were really designed to prevent the process from leading to any type of true awakening or freedom, so that the Church of Scientology could maintain control over its followers. And it's just a shame that there are so many interesting practices. Like Scientology once you realize what all of the different Scientology processes were, and the ancient wisdom that they were actually connected to, that L. Ron Hubbard stole them from, it's actually a really interesting mechanism for moving through a spiritual awakening. Where the Church of Scientology has gone wrong, and what all cults do when they go wrong, is rather than processing towards the desires of the individual student or adept or person in the processing chair, Scientology created their own book of ethics, and the only way that you could advance in Scientology was if you were processed in the direction of Scientology's desires rather than your own. That's a cult. That's what a cult does. A cult doesn't give you free will. A cult forces you to process in the direction of their desire, of their will, rather than you being able to come up with your own desires and process process towards the free will choices that are going to allow you to live a satisfying life. And it's just unfortunate that that's happened and that so many people have fallen victim to that process. But the potential of power processing is still really great. And decoupled from the Church of Scientology, I think that it can serve as a placeholder for processes that we have in our tool belt, depending on what's happening in our lives. And so, you know, McMaster's methods, you could argue, had the potential to actually deliver on the promise of Scientology, but because his processes were limited, because it's one of those things that the pharmaceutical industry has to deal with, right? It's like, well, wait, if we heal all the disease, we don't have a business anymore. So let's just create processes and let's just create pills that reduce pain, that provide a little bit of relief, but allow us to sell this forever. Well, that's what Hubbard did with spirituality. Rather than allowing somebody to truly be illuminated and enlightened via these processes, he capped them and limited them and always moved the next part of the process up the tier, where you had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to ultimately get it. And because of this, people rarely reached liberation unless they were just truly deep seekers who would have gotten there on their own anyway. And it's just a shame that so much truth got bastardized and obfuscated in the service to a narcissistic cult. And unfortunately, this is what happens with cults all the time. They weave nuggets of truth into what they're doing, and that's what ends up hooking curious seekers. But if you're not careful, you can then fall victim to the fact that they are going to get you to abdicate your desires to the desires of the organization. And McMaster's was once a beloved figure within the Church of Scientology, but ultimately tormented by Hubbard's manipulation and homophobia, because McMaster was a gay gentleman. And in Scientology, being gay means that you're a 1.1 on the tone scale, and that's a very bad score. And of course, that's disgraceful, and it's such a poor use of an otherwise effective practice. But Hubbard basically gaslit McMaster and made him think that his process wasn't good and that he wasn't a good person. And, you know, his contributions were erased, leading to his isolation and tragic end. And this just showcases the darker side of how spiritual tools, when misused, can really be damaging. And I would say that gaslighting someone is spiritual manipulation. And so we just have to keep that in mind as we're exploring, especially fringe topics. And I guess you could argue mainstream topics is being hyper vigilant about when are we being gaslit, and is my free will being honored in this process or not. So I'll move forward to the actual process, because I think that's a much more interesting thing for us to dive into. But this is an adopted process from John McMaster's. There's more that he added to this process, but the one that I use on a very regular basis is this very simple process, and it starts with name a condition. So a condition could be, I'm frustrated about this thing that's happening in my project. A condition could be, I don't know where my next paycheck's going to come from. Whatever is present for you. A condition could be the AC went out in my house, which actually happened last night. So whatever feels most present and urgent for you is the condition. And what you want to do is you want to let what one of my coaches, Dexter Gelfand, calls your spiritual compass. So your spiritual compass is basically whatever you flashes before your mind's eye. That's the thing that's ready to be addressed. And so oftentimes when people try to meditate, they have what oftentimes gets called monkey mind. And monkey mind is when you have all of these thoughts rattling around in your head and you can't control those thoughts. And so a lot of meditation practices will tell you to you know, slowly just release those, throws those thoughts up into the cloud. I've found that one of the best mechanisms for being able to get into a quiet mind, and one of the reasons that I very rarely have active thoughts in my brain unless I'm actually thinking about something, is because my meditation process has always been, okay, I see this condition that's in my mind, so that's whatever thought pops up. Where do I feel that in my body? And then I will do my best to feel that as sensation. I'll pull that thought down into my body, feel it as sensation in my nervous system, and all thoughts are energy, right? And if I can feel through the energy, I can cipher that the way that you might de-encrypt something that's been encrypted, and I can figure out where that fits in my thinking and in my awareness so that I can properly connect dots and continue to move forward. So this particular process is incorporating some of that would be like a Gestalt therapy where you're feeling through the sensations that come up around certain thoughts and ideas, but it's also allowing you a safe space to express bad ideas. And so to some extent, this is a shadow work opportunity, and shadow work is just you confronting the potentials of how bad you could be, and getting a deep understanding of that, feeling through all of that dark energy, that heavy energy, so that you don't actually unconsciously act that out in the world. And so the next question is, after you've named a condition, is how could you handle that? And this method, helps us vent issues, remove bad ideas, and uncover actual solutions. Because just like if you've ever read The Artist Way or done the morning pages, the morning pages are where you just stream of consciousness, fill up 3 pages in the morning, and it doesn't have to be good. You're not going to publish it, just whatever comes into your head. These sunglasses are white, my coffee mug is brown. You're just getting all the bad ideas out, and you're starting to get your juices turning. And what ultimately happens when you give yourself the space to vent bad ideas is, once those bad ideas have been exhausted, on the other side of that is usually a good idea. And so this process is about allowing for the shadow work of working through and acknowledging some of the bad ideas in order to get to a good idea. So let me take a quick drink of water because I'm getting a little sweaty here. So a condition in this process is something occupying your mind. It's whatever pops up in your mind's eye. So whatever is present for you in the moment. And how would you handle that? Handling involves brainstorming ideas that come to mind and dealing with the condition without labeling them as good or bad. We want to allow ourselves to have whatever thoughts and ideas we're having in a judgment-free zone. So an example of a condition could be, I'm running out of money. And possible ways to handle that, and you would just list these stream of conscious until you can't think of anything else. Possible ways of handling running out of money would be find a new client, get a higher paying job, reduce my expenses, etc., etc. So maybe the condition is I'm mad at my girlfriend. So possible ways to handle that would be to yell at her, break up, eat chocolate cake. So are those good ideas? We're not judging them as good or bad because we're not enacting these ideas. We're giving ourselves a safe container where we can have ideas good and bad. And ultimately what we're doing is we're expanding our awareness about what's happening in us so that we can draw a linear path in the direction of the outcomes that we want. And so the goal is not to filter ideas, but to list all possible ways that you could handle a situation, which allows full expression of those thoughts and feelings. And this reduces emotional interference, leading to clearer and more effective solutions. I just realized that if you're tuned into the Twitter space, I've had myself on mute this entire time, so I apologize. I hope that somebody found the YouTube link, but you're going to have to go back and watch the YouTube link. If you click through to my profile and find that YouTube link, you'll be able to watch this to the beginning, and then I'll open up the stage towards the end and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. But to give a brief recap, we're talking about a process called power processing. And the idea is that you name a condition, whatever is happening in your life right now, and then you list possible ways that you could handle that. And you're doing it in such a way where you're giving yourself a safe container where you don't have to worry about a bad idea. You're saying things so that you can see all the dots, see what's happening in you, have an emotional reaction and sensation to what's actually happening in the present moment, and start to process that out. So the process goes, step one in the process is that you name a condition, and step two is how could you handle that. So I'm going to go ahead and do it live in a Word document. If you click through to my profile, you'll be able to find the video feed so that you can see this. But this is an actual frustration that I'm having right now, and I just want to showcase how this process would work. So first we would do name the condition. And so the condition for me is our game dashboard uses a third-party API that isn't working, and we cannot fix it without their help. So this is deeply frustrating for me. And so what I would do is just list out, how could you handle that? So I could talk to my dev team. I could open a ticket with Infura, which is the third-party company. I could search the dev forums. I could make an announcement to my community that says we're assessing the situation. I could live stream and talk about the frustration live. So what I'm doing, I've actually already enacted all of these things, but what I did when this first came up and because I'm so well versed in this process, my brain just automatically goes into, okay, these are the things that you could do in order to handle this, and then I can order whether or not these things are a good idea. But what I want to do is keep returning to the condition until I can't think of any other thing that I could do. So if I go back to the condition of our game dashboard uses a third-party API that isn't working, and we can't fix it without their help, well, how else could I handle that? Well, I can ask my dev team to look at the forums while I'm doing my live stream. I can hope and pray that by working through this process, that's going to somehow positively affect the consciousness of somebody on the Infura dev team, and they're going to fix it on their end, and everything will just magically work again. I can make sure that we figure out from Infura how to write a proper error backlog so that in the future we'll know what's happening, and we'll at least be able to give an updated report. We can look into other third-party API servers that maybe don't have this type of problem. I could just relax and trust that my community understands that sometimes tools don't always work, and that ultimately we're doing all of these things that I'm saying, and that we'll get things up and running as quickly as possible. I could yell and scream. I could go for a run. I could punch my couch. I could swing a t-ball bat against a bag of trash. So what am I doing? As I'm saying all this stuff, a lot of the big feelings that I have about this frustration are coming to the surface. And in that expression, I'm allowing some of that energy to vent and transmute itself. And in many ways, I believe that the more that we get back to a place of emotional balance where something doesn't feel actively frustrating, that is the biggest contribution we can give to reality rendering itself in a way that is alignment with the outcomes that we want. Ultimately, the outcome that I want is for my community to have a satisfying experience with the game dashboard. And so how do I serve that purpose? Well, I need to get get into alignment with the fact that the game dashboard working is a possibility, that we've had over 99% uptime, that this too will pass, that the Infura team is one of the better teams in crypto, and that they'll be able to resolve this on their end, that I'm not the only one opening a ticket with them. Literally everybody who opens a ticket with Infura is doing that right now. And so all of these things start to give me a hope and then a faith that this thing is going to be resolved. I've already done so much of this stuff before I even went on the live stream, and so what a blessing it would be for me to end this process and end this live stream and have everything back up and working. And even if that isn't the case, then I can continue to run through this condition, because right now I'm kind of feeling pretty good. It doesn't really feel like that's a big issue. I actually do feel like it's going to play itself out and that the wheels are in motion for that resolution. But if for some reason there was a new condition that came up, so maybe the new condition that came up for me is someone in my community will get upset that I'm live streaming rather than fixing the issue. So this is probably not going to happen, but what I'm doing is addressing just a subtle fear, because I want to make sure that I'm wholly in emotional alignment with the outcome that I'm looking for. So if somebody in my community gets upset that I'm live streaming, what are the ways that I could handle that? Well, I could feel my big feelings is what I would do first. I could respond to them in as articulate and emotionally balanced way as possible, and give them the situation and talk to them about all the things that I had already done before I went on the live stream. I could express to them that for me, doing these live streams gives me so much energy, and that energy allows me to be incredibly productive in the project and to be able to get more done for the project. And that has allowed me to attract really interesting phone calls this week, and things that are ultimately going to be beneficial to what we're building as a community. And so by live streaming, it wasn't that I was shirking responsibility and not fixing an issue. Before I came on the live stream, I did all of the things that I've said in order to set the wheels in motion of having this fixed. But the live stream for me was a commitment that I made to myself, a commitment I made to the community that wants to tune in at 3 p.m. Central every single day. And ultimately, it's an experiment. This is an experiment for me in rendering reality. If I can talk about the things that I'm interested in, if I can give full expression to who I am, the fears, worries, concerns I have, but also the ambitions and hopes and faith that I have, then I believe that will call in the energetic circumstances that ultimately make the projects that I'm working on as successful as they can be. And so ultimately, what am I doing? I'm saying how I could handle that, and I'm feeling better about it. I'm feeling more energized. And so I just keep cycling through this process until I feel emotionally balanced, until I feel like, you know what, that is the solution. That is how I would handle it. So let's go back to the outline, and let's just go through a couple of other sample conditions. So first, at the top of a sheet of paper, we're just going to say name the condition. And remember, the condition is whatever your current state is, whatever the frustration is, whatever the emotion is, whatever the situation or scenario is, you just name that. And then you list out what are all the ways that you could handle that. And the most important thing is you're not looking for the best answer. What you're looking for is creating a safe container where you can say whatever you want to say. This is actually, how could you handle this? All bad ideas accepted. Because when you can vent your bad ideas in a safe forum within a journal, you're not going to enact them in the world. The energy impulse that would move you into a bad decision like that just isn't going to happen, because you're going to have exhausted some of the tentacles of that. So again, one of the examples was, if I'm running out of money, well, how can I handle that? I can find a new client. I can get a higher paying job. I can reduce expenses. I can go recycle cans. I can call the SBA and see if they have any opportunities. I could join a temp agency. I could get a remote job. I could join Upwork. So you're just listing all the possible things, and then you're looking for resonance. As you feel your big feelings and find balance in your body, you're going to resonate with the thing that is meant for you, that has the most energy, and that is going to be most effective when you take action on it. So here's an example of me listing bad ideas. But again, this is shadow work. This is a safe container where I can list bad ideas. So let's say the condition is I'm mad at my girlfriend. Well, how could I handle that? Remember, I'm not actually doing this. I'm just kind of fantasizing about doing it to transmute the energy. I could yell, I could break up, I could eat chocolate cake, I could eat a bowl of cereal, I could go for a walk. I could put Nirvana on and scream in my car. I could go and key somebody's car. So whatever my spiritual compass, which is the thing that's ordering my thoughts, whatever comes to the forefront of the movie screen of my brain, I'm listing that out until I get to something like I could have a conversation. I could own my part in this. I could recognize, actually, I am somewhat responsible for that. I could apologize to my girlfriend for the part that I'm responsible about. I could get really clear in what I want to communicate and how much I love my girlfriend, and make sure that I communicate that to her, even if it means writing her a letter and literally reading that aloud to her. You know, so ultimately, as you get through the bad ideas, good ideas start to come to the surface. And the cool thing is that if you do this on a regular basis, your natural set point will be to just go to the good ideas. But if I get really frustrating, first I have to work through the bad ideas until I can get to the good ones. So by allowing shadow expression, we're allowing ourselves to safely express bad ideas, which prevents us from acting them out. You know, people who don't do shadow work, who don't understand the depths of what they're capable of, are the ones that end up enacting them. You know, if you've ever heard Jordan Peterson talk about his study of the Nazis and how could the Nazis go and do all of these atrocities, well, it's because Germans at that time hadn't really explored their shadow, and because they didn't have an understanding of what they were capable of, they were able to fall into the totalitarian tiptoe where they just kind of kept accepting a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and ultimately they were trying to see, oh, it'll get better at some point, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse until they were committing the worst atrocities that you could commit. When you are fully aware of your shadow and your shadow is processed, you won't take action on that because you will know where that ultimately leads to. And this process for me often leads to a point where the absurdity of some of the bad ideas that I come from make me laugh so hard that it actually shifts me into a focus that's more positive and has more actionable solutions. So the way that you apply this is you just pull out a legal pad or journal or a Google Doc like I just did, and you go through this process until you land on the next good step, or until you literally cannot think of any other options for how you could handle something. And when you get to the place where you literally can't think of another way that you could handle that situation, then you tune into yourself, maybe take a few deep breaths, just notice what's happening in your body. And if you haven't landed on a solution yet, you say, well, is there another condition here? Because sometimes you'll go down the rabbit hole of deeper conditions. Sometimes it'll be, well, actually, I don't really care about that thing anymore, but I don't have any friends. Or I don't care about that thing anymore, but my car insurance is out and I don't know how I'm going to renew it because I just got a ticket. So all of these things become conditions that ultimately are locking up your energy, and your energy is your potential to land on solutions. And so as you tend to all of those things that were subconscious or living in the unconscious, as you bring them to conscious awareness and tend to them, you free up that energy to then go out as tentacles and find the solutions that you're looking for so that you can consistently make right actions. All right. So I talked about one of my coaches, Dex Gelfand. He has the concept of the spiritual compass. And the spiritual compass is just this idea that your brain is going to serve up the exact right thing at the exact right moment. So don't judge a thought that comes up. If it comes up, it's the thing that you need to list. So no matter how ridiculous it comes from, if you're frustrated and you're saying, how could I handle this? And the thing that comes to you is eat a bowl of ice cream, throw ice cream at a window. it doesn't matter what you're saying. This is a fantasy, and these linear thoughts or these phrases are just ways for energy and emotion to escape your body. So just go with whatever your spiritual compass goes with, because as you go from eating ice cream to throwing ice cream to, oh, I remember this time that ice cream fell on my lap, when my dad left us. Like, it's not always going to be that profound, but this is the way that your spiritual compass moves you down the rabbit hole of your subconscious, unconscious brain. And engaging with this process while you're paying attention to the sensations and emotions that are happening in your body can quickly move you out of a feeling of being stuck and towards more powerful results. And so ultimately, wherever these processes come from, power processing is something that was co-opted by Scientology. These processes, however, and many of the processes in Scientology and in many systems of spirituality are just tapping into ancient wisdom and genuine spiritual practices and Hermeticism. And so if you go back to the root of the root of the root, Scientology doesn't own any of these processes. They were stolen from ancient wisdom, and the opportunity that we have is that we can bring ancient wisdom back to the surface and the forefront and utilize these to be more effective, more loving, more aligned with truth in our lives. And so the goal is to reclaim techniques from all spiritual practices that allow us to have maximized personal growth and spiritual communion free from manipulation and distortion. So I think that's about all I'll say about power processing. It's been a very effective tool for me to be able to work out in the moment what some of the steps that I can take. A lot of times the feedback that I get about a lot of metaphysical processes, is, oh, that's just navel gazing. You're just sitting there putting your head in the sand and not actually doing something. And power processing is a way for you to work through the emotional content just like you would in a good meditation practice, but it's a more active mind meditation where you're naming each condition as it comes up. You're listing all of the ways, good and bad, that you could handle that. And then when you run out of ways that you could handle that, you either resonate with one of those things as action that you could then take, or you address whatever your spiritual compass is giving you as the next condition. And as you go down this rabbit hole, you will free up enough energy to land on the solutions that are relevant to you and allow you to be a highly effective person that is not only living your best life, but living a life that is in service to your family, your community, and the world as a whole. So I will tune into the chat, go down this rabbit and see if there's any chat in here. Adrian says, John, where can we learn more about some of the memorization techniques used by McMasters as a way to learn more effectively? Well, unfortunately, many of his techniques, when he was in Scientology, I believe it was the late 60s, and many of those techniques got co-opted by L. Ron Hubbard, bastardized, moved away from their initial intent, and his name was taken off of a lot of that, and so it's hard to figure out which of his processes were actually his. But if you Google his name and the word Scientology, you will definitely figure out which of the processes in Scientology are attributed to him. And, some of being a good spiritual seeker is using your own discernment to understand the best way to use some of those. In many ways, there are a lot of other what they call free zone Scientology groups. So these are groups that recognize Scientology as a cult, but see some of the processes as beneficial. And so if you search out free zone Scientology, you can find a wealth of information. Some of it is good and some of it is bad, but it's certainly an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Adrian says maybe somebody from Infura is watching this. I hope so. That would jump me to the top of the ticket line. So that's all the chat that I see on the YouTube side. If anybody wants to come up on the Twitter Space side, now is your opportunity. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and cut this one a little bit shorter than we have been doing. Go back through this and run power processing for yourself. Just as a recap, the way that you do it is you just pull out a sheet of paper. At the top, you say name the condition. The condition is whatever is present for you. So the condition could be I'm bored. The condition could be I don't have any money. The condition could be I have too much money, but I earned it in a way that I'm not comfortable of. And then after you've named that, you just say, well, how could you handle that? And you allow yourself to brainstorm all of the good and bad ideas. And what will ultimately happen is you will get in touch with your shadow. You will feel through some of the things that you need to feel through by addressing bad ideas. And on the other side of processing that energy, you will land on good ideas that you can then take action on. So I appreciate everybody that tuned in live on both Twitter and YouTube. We'll be back at 3 p.m. Central Time tomorrow.